We're ready to go. I've already hit record. We're out of practice mode and I've hit record.
Are we ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, HCC, for joining us this afternoon for understanding your social and emotional intelligence. Mike Van Heuser is an expert in the psychology of leadership and human performance and serves as a leadership and peak performance coach and consultant to business leaders, entrepreneurs, and elite amateur and professional athletes, helping them reach their potential and achieve breakthrough performance in sports, business, and life. He is the founder and president of Van Heuser and Associates, a leadership and peak performance think tank and idea studio. Mike is a graduate of Baylor University and a former senior executive of Accenture with over 30 years of consulting experience with small and large companies, helping to develop high performance individuals, teams, and organizations. His client list includes small startup businesses, Fortune 500 companies, churches, nonprofit organizations, executives, entrepreneurs, and amateur and professional athletes and performers. He has delivered many leadership development programs for businesses as well as students and athletes, including Rice and Baylor University. He is also the author of several best-selling books, including his book Moments, Making Your Life Count for What Matters Most, and Be Present, Showing Up When It Matters Most. Personally, Mike has been married to his wife Gina for 30 years and is the coach of his own Van Heuser basketball team of 5 boys. Mike is an endurance athlete who has qualified for the Boston Marathon. He also serves as a chair for the board of KDISD Education Foundation Board and is a former board chair and advisory board member of Child Advocates, a private nonprofit organization that finds safe, permanent, and loving homes for abused and neglected children. Mike, thank you for being with us today, and we're excited to learn about the importance of understanding our social and emotional intelligence. I now pass the baton to you.
Thanks, Tamble. I really appreciate that intro, and it's great to be here today, and look forward to sharing about this topic. And basically, what our roadmap is for today, we want to talk about emotional intelligence and how important it is. So I'm going to cover a few definitions of emotional intelligence and why it's important, and some of the research that's been done around emotional intelligence. And then I'm going to transition to 4 B statements, basically, that can help you, I think, in this area and basically apply this concept of emotional intelligence and breaks it down for it to be really practical in your life. And then a couple of action items or next steps that you could take to follow up on this as well. And then we'll leave some time for questions at the end as well. When we think about emotional intelligence, it's important. Everybody knows, I think, what intelligence is, and there's been a lot of tests and assessments and things that are written about regarding IQ and basically your intelligence. But Daniel Goldman was one of the first pioneers to write a book about EQ and emotional intelligence. And if you get nothing else out of this, I think the focus to break down what is emotional intelligence is basically discovering yourself and how to connect and impact others. And so being able to understand who you are and who you're created to be, and then also how to interact and connect with other people as well. So that's kind of our basic premise for what emotional intelligence is. And I thought it would be helpful to go into the research and what Daniel Goldman actually wrote about and go into this chart. And there's a lot on there, and I want to break this down, and then we'll get really practical with this as well. But if you see the quadrant, you see self and you see social. So if you think about this side of the quadrant, there's yourself, and it's understanding who you are. And then the social has to do with how you interact with other people. And along this axis, you see there's a recognition piece and a regulation piece. I would prefer something like how you activate it. So if there's recognizing kind of who you are and who others are, but also how does it look like in practice? That's what this regulation part stands for. And so as you look at this quadrant, some of the things that are in here start with self, and it's really understanding who you are. And so it's emotional self-awareness. It's understanding that we have emotions, that we have different characteristics. We have a head and heart, and those need to go in together. And there's been a lot of focus again on head knowledge, and that's very important, but also heart knowledge or heart, awareness and understanding, are you a compassionate person? Are you somebody who's really passionate? Does anger ever creep into, your personality? And it's just really understanding and being aware of basically your emotions. The second step in this of self-awareness is kind of an accurate self-assessment. So once you understand your emotions and who you are, it's a self-assessment of how does that play out for you, and is this a strength? Is this something that is a part of who you are? And doing an accurate self-assessment, and that begins with you. But you also can, in that self-assessment, I think, ask people who know you best, what do you see in me regarding, my emotional intelligence or who I am, what my personality is. And then leading to a self-confidence. It's understanding, again, who you are, who you were created to be, and how can you walk in that. I think so much is focused on other people and others and what others are doing. And, social media can be a good thing, but it also can be a comparison game where we compare ourselves to other people. And why wasn't I built like that? But I think as we think about our emotional makeup, it's important to understand, who we are, and that there's a reason for that, and how we're able to walk in confidence around that as well. If you go over to this side and the social side, this is where you get towards interacting with others. So once you have self-awareness of your emotions, there's an accurate self-assessment, there's a self-confidence that you're working out your identity in that. It's understanding how does that relate to other people. So it's a social awareness of empathy. I think when we get in tune with who we are, there's a natural empathy that can build up about who others are and what their makeup is as well. As you think about any type of organization that you've been a part of, and it could, be in the future of business, or it could be a social club or a group that you're a part of, there's an organizational awareness of not only people who may be smart in certain areas, but also that they've got interpersonal strengths that come to bear to help them make them a leader or make them a person of influence. So also, as a part of this organizational awareness, I think it's really important to understand what a culture is like. As a consultant, and I've been able to work with a lot of different organizations, as Tambla said, from churches to businesses to sports teams. Having an organizational awareness is important about what are the core values and what is the culture like, and some of the things that are part of that organization, so that you can make an impact and be able to influence that culture. And then a service orientation. Again, this gets into being of service, being a person of influence, being a leader. And so those come into play in relationships one-on-one, but also in more group relationships as a part of an organization. So let's go back down to this bottom quadrant here of this regulation or self-management. Once you understand kind of who you are, staying on the self side, there's how do you activate that, and how does that play out for you? And so the first one here that Daniel wrote about was self-control. It's understanding your emotions and understanding how that plays out. If there's certain things that you have as a need, and then that tends to lead towards, being angry or being nervous about those types of things, you need to understand that about yourself and then work that out to where you can have control in those situations. I've seen this with athletes where maybe a basketball player is a real high energy guy and he's always, going 100 miles an hour on the court, but then there's a stoppage of play and he has to come to the free throw line to shoot a free throw. And bringing that high speed nature into, a nature of self-control is really important, because you have to be patient, take a breath, dribble the basketball, and then shoot. And so self-control is really important in that, even if somebody's, like I said, a high energy person. And so understanding how to do that and manage yourself is important. Transparency is important too, to be open, not only to yourself but to other people about who you are, and being transparent about that, not trying to cover that up to yourself or others. And I work with a lot of people in coaching around mental toughness and resiliency, not only in sports but also in business and in life. And I think being transparent about things to ourselves, it begins there, but it's with other people too. How many times has somebody asked you, how are you doing? And you say, fine. And especially with everything that's gone on, I guess, in the last, 18 months, there's a lot that people have had to process, both individually and as a country, as a world. And so being transparent about that begins with yourself, and being able to admit, kind of things that you need to know about yourself is important. The adaptability comes in. I think when we're real with ourselves, we can be adaptable to circumstances. There are principles that come into play that are important. And so adaptability is a very good skill to have, and be able to adapt to different situations, to different circumstances, and to different environments. The achievement drive and initiative go hand in hand. And I think with the achievement drive, it's then, you can think about it as goal achievement. And you can think about it in terms of, getting my degree and then moving on to a job, and, those types of things. But I think it's also just maximizing your potential, and making sure that you're setting those goals, but that they're grounded in who you are. I counsel people sometimes on career development, and sometimes they want to pursue something that may not be a strength of theirs, and yet there's some natural talents or natural strengths that they have that would be a more natural pursuit. And so, that gets into understanding that, and then taking initiative to do something. That's that. And then as you get back over to the final quadrant, there's relationship management. So you kind of put all of these things together, understanding who you are, being able to develop that in a social setting, one-on-one relationships, being able to manage yourself and how that comes out. You get to some of these other things that are maybe broader, and you don't have to have a title of leader to be an influencer. And so in relationship management, it's some of the things that you hear, inspirational leadership, that you can, who you are, you're confident in that, and also you're confident in making a connection with other people and can provide leadership or influence to others. This mindset of developing others, whatever gifts and talents that you have, how are you bringing those forward to make a meaningful impact in the world and to develop other people in their gifts and talents as well? Influence, again, we do a lot of leadership workshops and programs, but we basically equate leadership with influence. So you may have a formal title of leader that you've had in different roles, but also you may be moving into that. And how can you have influence with people? This change catalyst is just a fancy word for being a catalyst for change, or being able to jumpstart change in your sphere of influence. So being able to, when you understand yourself and you understand other people, I find that it's more natural to be able to impact change. Conflict management, that's probably a whole session in and of itself. But I think, again, when you're in touch with who you are and can connect with other people, it's a lot easier to, it's maybe not, it's not fun, but it's easier to manage conflict, because you're able to seek to understand other people better and really get to the heart of aligning on what's most important and how you manage that. And I think one side note on that, I feel like over the last several years that we've lost this art of dialogue and being able to manage through conflict. And I think that's a real important skill for leaders to be able to do. And this is where EQ comes in to bear. It comes into all of these places. But if you just think about that, from an intelligence standpoint, you can understand the 5 steps to manage conflict. And there are plenty of books that have been written on that. But at the heart of it, a lot of times it is at our heart, and connecting that way and truly understanding who we are and understanding another person and being able to negotiate those differences. And there may be a step from an IQ standpoint, but from an emotional standpoint, that's where the heart of being able to get through the conflict and to develop resolution really comes to play. And that's why this is so important. And then the last piece, teamwork and collaboration, working as a high performing team and being able to collaborate with other people. So I wanted to give you a backdrop of this. We're going to get real practical with these 4Bs, but I thought it was important you might be interested in some of the research and just looking at this. And you may not, resonate with all of these points, but there are probably things that come to bear that you're thinking about regarding, understanding a little bit more about what emotional intelligence is and how can I apply it in my life. My definition of emotional intelligence, to me, it just centers around understanding yourself and understanding others. It's this journey and opportunity of discovering who you are and then making a meaningful impact in the lives of others. So beyond kind of a fancy chart, it's just really coming to grips with who you are and who other people are and how you can make a difference based on how you're wired and based on the opportunities that you've been given. So I wanted to talk about 4Bs, and these are kind of takeaways for today's session as well. As you think about that backdrop that we just talked about regarding emotional intelligence, being aware is kind of the first step and the first action item, I think, around this. It's self-awareness. Self-awareness is the key to leadership and influence. I don't know if you have friends like this, but have you ever had a friend who can't sing, but they're always singing? They're just singing in the shower, they're singing in the car, they're singing all the time, and they're not self-aware that that may not be their skill set. They may not be winning the voice, but they're not aware of those things. And so we have to, make sure that we're aware of what our strengths are, the areas for growth, and to be able to work on those as well. But if we want to make a difference, if we want to get in touch with who we are and then lead and influence, it's being aware of things. And there are keys that you need to be aware of, and I've written down 3 of them. But I think the first step to being aware is being aware of your strengths. A lot of times people, I've seen it in performance evaluations where people will say, well, you've got this strength, but here are the 10 things that you need to work on. And a lot of times when I'm working with athletes, the way our mind works, a lot of times they'll say, well, I did this good, but these are the 10 things that I did wrong. And so sometimes our brain, the way it's wired, can, go to the negative things. But I think you have to focus on strengths and have to focus on strengths-based leadership. And yes, grow in the areas that you can grow in, but maximize your strengths. There's a friend of mine who has written some books on leadership, and he says that your fully, maximized strengths are going to be of far greater value than your marginally improved weaknesses. So your maximized strengths, when you're in the zone of maximizing your strengths, are always going to be of greater value to whatever you're doing and whoever you're with than marginally improved weaknesses, because no matter how you improve in that area of weakness or growth, when you're maximizing your strength, it already comes natural to you. And so maximizing that's going to be of far greater value. So getting in touch with your strengths is important. And we'll talk about an action item regarding that. But when we talk about strengths, you need to go deeper than just say, well, leadership's a strength of mine, and go deeper than that to say, well, casting vision for other people, or coaching and giving feedback to other people, or I feel like I can walk in a room and connect with people and understand where they're coming from. Those are all more tangible kind of strengths related to an area of leadership. So it's getting to that level of detail to make a list of your strengths. And I would encourage you maybe to do a self-assessment and to think about 5 to 10 strengths that you have and be aware of those. A second area would be being aware of your passions or what energizes you. So you may love the word passion. I'm really passionate about this. But think about that, and also not only do a self-assessment, but ask other people around that. And if you don't like the word passion, maybe it's what energizes you. When you're in that zone of speaking, or when you're in that zone of, doing certain tasks or certain things, what is that energizes you? And what I find a lot of times is that people will find alignment between their strengths and what energizes them. And this is where, again, emotional intelligence comes into play, because you may be strong intellectually in certain areas, and you may do that for a certain period of your life. But at some point, it may not be what energizes you. And I think it's important to find, that alignment between those two things, because that's where you're going to be, unstoppable, and where you're maximizing, your potential and achieving your goals, is when you have strengths that align with those passions or what energizes you. And so from a career standpoint, as you think about that and think about even things that you're studying now, start to analyze, what are my strengths, and what are my passions, what energizes me. An example that I mentioned, if I was going through this and assessing, well, beyond leadership, a strength of mine is coaching and giving feedback to others. The passion might be that I love making an impact in people's lives. And so as you go through that assessment, that's the level of detail that you need to get to. And then I think the third area that we need to be aware of is our opportunities. So not only, what are strengths, what energizes us, but what are the opportunities? Because if we just sit there, then we're just not doing anything to make a meaningful difference with our lives. And opportunities, I feel like, are all around us. And so how am I making a difference? How am I taking initiative and leading out and being aware of those opportunities? There are a lot of people, who are dealing with a lot of things, and you may be in a position to influence them, to help them, to encourage them. And it may be because of your strengths and because of, the things that energize you, that you're put in a position to have an opportunity to make a difference, not only with them, but other people. So that's what we need to be aware of. There's a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. My mom was an English teacher, so words meant something around our house, the definition of words, but also poems, quotes, things like that. And Ralph Waldo Emerson was one of my favorite poets. And he had this question. It's, what has become clear since we last met? So what has become clear since we last met? And this is a great thing that you can ask yourself on a weekly basis. You may, ask it of your friends. He used to use that question to ask his friends that. And what he means by that is really, what are the data points in your life? As you look back at the last week, what things have happened in your life? What are the data points? What are the things that have happened? Did we just kind of go through the motions, or are there specific points that made an impact in your life, and what are those? The second piece is clarity, because he's talking about becoming clear. So what clarity have you drawn from that? It could be the last week, the last month, the last year, but what clarity are you drawing from that? What are things that have become clear to you because of that? And then the third piece of this is, what action does that drive you towards? So again, understanding what's happening to you in those circumstances and situations, what is a clarity that you're drawing from that? And then what action is that driving towards? And so that, I think, is a great quote as far as self-awareness. And I think what you're going to find as you think about, the next stage of your life, wherever you are, is that the piece and point where your deep gladness, your excitement, your passion meets the world's needs is where you're going to find your calling. And I think that's really important. And that's what being aware is all about. It's being aware is where you discover your calling and understand who you are and the opportunities before you. The second B is being present. And again, with the coaching I do, the athletes I work with, the businesses I work with, even for myself, being present, not only physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, is really important. And I think we find a lot of times people are present physically, but they're not, present mentally, emotionally, or spiritually in that moment. And they're either worrying about the past or, having fear of the future. And it's so important, if, we're going to get in touch with who we are and then the opportunities before us, that we're present in those moments. We're not thinking about what we need to do next or what we didn't do in the past, but being present in what's going on. And again, I see this a lot in the sports world, but I see it, for people and just in life. And we're still thinking about bad moments, or sometimes it's good moments. You may know somebody who accomplished something great and they're still talking about it, 10 years later. And surely they've had, good moments that have happened since then. There's a quote that I like that says, many of us crucify ourselves between two thieves, regret for the past and fear of the future. And I think those are thieves because they steal. The past can steal. Regret for past things that we haven't done. Fear of future things can steal from what our joy is in this current moment to make a difference in that. And so it's really important. And being present is where you engage. So understanding who you are is what we're talking about today, emotional intelligence, but being present is where you engage. It's every day stepping out into this moment and making a difference with your life. So that's kind of the key next step. I love one other quote around this that Ken Blanchard, who's written a lot of books on leadership, said that the legacy you live is the legacy you leave. The legacy you live is the legacy you leave. So every day, the things that you're doing are a part of your legacy. You know, we don't reach a magical age at the end of our lives and then think, well, I hope I left a legacy, or I hope I made an impact with my life. It's those daily choices and decisions, and how are we engaging in those based on who we are. The third step is being a learner. So this is the third B. And you know, lifelong learning is important. You're in a mode right now where you're learning, and there's a goal and there's a reason why you're, you know, taking courses and classes and working on a degree and working on, you know, next steps. And for me, the best leaders, the best organizations are lifelong learners or learning organizations. And they never reach a point where they stop learning, because that's where we stop growing. And we have to make sure that, you know, we're focused on that. The other key around this, I think, is making sure that you're putting systems and routines and habits that help you learn. So obviously there are things that in, you know, being in college, taking courses, you know, there's a curriculum, there's a syllabus, there's things that are scheduled. We know we're going to have that test on Thursday. You know, we've got to study for that. We've got to organize our time. So you're on a schedule right now, and you're probably, some of you balancing, you know, personal life, maybe professional life, as well as school. And so there are a lot of demands on your time, and being organized around that is really important. But dedicating time for additional learning is important as well. And so examples of this would be, what books are you reading to, you know, to grow outside of the books that you have to read as a part of your classes? You know, are you passionate about leadership? So what are some leadership books that you can read? You know, do you have a digital device like a Kindle that would make it easier to carry around versus carrying around a book? Or do you like a book, so you're carrying that around? But having a system and routine, you know, for that. A few years ago, I started doing audiobooks because I found myself in the car a lot and wanted to maximize the time, and wanted to listen to something that was productive. So started doing that and consuming, you know, more books that way. But there are a lot of things that you can do to grow. I think also being a learner is about finding mentors and finding free, we call it finding the free, or finding free information. There are plenty of people maybe who are ahead of you in experience, or in they are where you want to try to be, maybe as a career or something else. And they would love to share with you. And so setting up time within in the scope of your week to be able to meet with them, to, you know, ask questions. I encourage a lot of people to, if they've got certain thing they're pursuing in their career or the next stage of their life, to develop 3 to 5 questions. And it's something that starts a conversation, and then start to meet with people over, you know, over Zoom or over WebEx or over, you know, coffee or lunch, as we meet, you know, more in person together. But however that you find that. And I've been asked the question a lot, well, how do we connect? Because we haven't been able to connect in person for a long time. I think even just scheduling another WebEx or Zoom meeting is important, or even using the phone like we used to be able to have conversations. But finding mentors and finding that free information is important. You can learn a lot from that. So being a learner is where you grow. It's focused on not only now as you're learning things, but also as you learn throughout your life as well. And then the final B is be a leader. And one other quote I wanted to mention about being a learner, I found it interesting that Michelangelo, who is the great artist and sculptor, even at age 87, had a quote that said, "I'm still learning." And so even somebody who had, you know, just really grown and become an expert in sculpting and become an expert in so many things was still learning, still growing, still learning how to do things, even at an older age. Being a leader is kind of where you put this into practice. And I think it's being a person of influence. So even if you don't have a title of leader right now, it's being an influencer. And I love the definition that Kevin Cashman has in a book that he wrote. He said, leadership is authentic self-expression that creates value. So leadership is authentic self-expression that creates value. And the reason, there are a lot of leadership definitions that I love, but the reason I love that definition is because it's not title based. And there are three pieces of this. There's authenticity. We're kind of talking about this today with emotional intelligence, is that being authentic is really important. Expressing yourself is really important, and then creating value. You can have people that are inauthentic and express themselves and therefore don't create value because it's fake. It's not authentic. You can be authentic and you can express yourselves in a way that doesn't create value. And again, that's where knowing other people and how to connect with other people is really important. And you can be authentic and want to create value, but never express yourself. And therefore, you never create value with the opportunities that you've been given. So authentic self-expression that creates value is what influence is all about, in a way that is making a meaningful difference with your life and is becoming a leader. Sociologists have done studies, and they've said even the most introverted person is going to influence or impact 10,000 people in their lifetime. 10,000 people. So even if you're more introverted, you're still going to impact people. And you can debate whether it's 10,000 or 1,000, but it's going to be people that you interact with every day. So the question is not, will you, impact people, but how are you impacting people? And so that's really important when you think about leadership, influence, and also emotional intelligence as well. I think seeking out leadership opportunities is really important. So it's, important that you seek those out, be proactive. Even if you don't have a title of leadership, how can you take on more responsibility? How can you know what's important to the people that you're leading with or working with? I had a conversation with my oldest son just about this the other day, who's gotten an opportunity to step up in his role because there's a lack of kind of where he is. He's about 2 years into his career. And so there's a lack of a manager in between the person he's working with, who's probably had about 10 to 12 years of experience. And so instead of saying, well, I don't have this, and there's a gap there, stepping into that and seeing, what are some additional things that he can take on. And I think being proactive is really important. As it relates to, again, the topic we're talking about, sometimes we may have to deal with difficult people. And I think understanding, how they're wired, we call them operating principles, but what do they need from us to be successful? And what do we need from them to be successful is really important, in having a conversation around that. And again, that's a whole different topic, but we've done a lot of workshops with teams and leaders, because having that kind of conversation when you're outside of an issue or a conflict is really important. And just starting a project or starting a relationship that way, and understanding, well, what's important to them, and what are some things that they need from me to be successful, and then what are some things I need from them. Examples of that would be, they may need status on a weekly basis on what you're working on or what you're doing. And so that would be good to know, versus just, thinking, well, they know I'm doing a good job, and so I never need to communicate about that. But that may be very important to them. For you, something that you need to be successful might be, well, I need feedback on how I'm doing. And if I'm, not doing something in the right way, what is that feedback, and how can I get that from them? And how can I communicate that to them, that I need more feedback? And so, again, those are some examples, again, about operating principles. But being a leader is, again, seeking out those opportunities. The other thing I would say about being a leader is not becoming complacent. I think that it's easy to become complacent or comfortable in certain roles. We were doing some programs at Baylor and also at Rice, and we were talking about school organizations. It might be student government, it might be a fraternity or sorority, and somebody becomes the event chair, and they're really comfortable in that, and they can, are really competent in that. It's a comfortable spot, but they have leadership capacity as well, and they're stepping into a new role of being the president of the organization. Well, that's where you step out of that comfort zone and start to think about, well, how can I lead and influence other people to take on the role that I've been doing? So again, I would encourage you to challenge yourself in this area, challenge yourself to take on responsibilities and lead out, and lead from a servant's heart. Again, it goes back to that service mindset of just how can I make a difference with, again, skills and the strengths that I have as well. So, and being a leader is where you make a positive impact with your sphere, within your sphere of influence, and fulfill your calling. So when we talk about sphere of influence, I use that term a lot, but basically it's your, the people that you're interacting with on a daily basis in all areas of your life. And ultimately, again, it's about, making a positive impact and fulfilling your calling around that. So those are the 4 B's: be aware, be present, be a learner, and be a leader. And again, y'all could probably add to the list, but I tried to summarize it just to 4, so we wouldn't have like 20 things we're trying to remember. But I think that these are a practical application of the chart we just looked at, and really take into consideration the practicality of, emotional intelligence and how it comes to play. You look at really the first 2 deal with individual leadership, and then, being a learner is starting to expand out to others, and then being a leader is where everything, comes into play, and you start to make more of an impact. Let me get some water real quick. I've been talking so much, so we're going to get to Q&A in just a second, but so one other quote, and then we'll get to kind of the action steps and close out for some Q&A. Stephen Covey, who wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it's a timeless book. It's a classic book, but one of the habits, and I thought about it today as we're thinking about this topic, is seek first to understand and then be understood. And I mentioned the other piece about, again, just having a dialogue, being able to connect with other people. I think, and again, don't want to go down, kind of this path, but I think we live, in a culture now where the hot take is kind of the, the style, or having a take. But sometimes communicating and connecting with other people and dialoguing about issues and conflict and getting to know one another and developing relationships is really important. And it seems like, again, that's been lost. But when we apply a timeless habit or principle like this to seek first to understand the situation, the person, how they're wired, connect with them, and then be understood, whether resolving conflict or just meeting somebody that doesn't look like us, but we can connect with and find that we have a lot of things in common, is a really important principle to live by. And it's, throughout my whole life, this has been a principle that I've lived by even before I knew what the principle was. But seeking to understand other people and to connect and ask questions about who they are and their experiences, and then to be understood, is really important. And I think a lot of times in today's culture, we want to flip that, and we want to be understood, and maybe we don't want to understand, or, and so there's a rhythm, I think, that provides healthy relationships and healthy culture and healthy dialogue as well. So here's some next steps, and these are some things that I would just suggest based on what we've talked about so far. One of the things, and I mentioned this earlier, is conduct a self-assessment to understand your strengths and passions. This is where you can get really practical with both IQ and EQ to understand who you are. But, what are your strengths? And I talked about going a level deeper than just, leadership or, certain core habit, but making sure you get down to more the task level. I'm really good at doing this, and make a list of those, and then make a list of passions, what energizes you, and find alignment with that. Because I also think, even if, you haven't even started a job yet, and you're looking for your first career job, and you're in the midst of that, this can help you with connecting well with that, connect with what I'm studying and who I am and how I'm studying myself, and to find alignment around those 3 things, what I'm getting my degree in or taking courses in, who I am and what my strengths are and what energizes me. Second thing would be find and meet with mentors. I mentioned that earlier, but just maybe you don't have a mentor, so it's finding a mentor. And it might be, through a speaker series like this. It might be, somebody on campus. It may be, maybe you're 1 degree of separation from somebody that you want to meet with. Maybe a friend of yours, you start to share, I feel like my strengths are this, and I'm really energized by this. Do you know anybody who's doing that type of thing? And your friend may say, well, I know so-and-so, you need to go meet with them. And I think people are happy to share about their experiences and be a sounding board for you. A third practical step would be putting in systems and routines and habits that will help you learn and grow. So just it's sectioning off time to do that. I start every day. There's a routine that I have, and you never want to get into a rut. You want to be innovative and mix that up. But I think routines are productive. And one of the routines I have is having a morning quiet time, and I can, do some reflective reading. I can just think about my day, think about the things that I want to do with my day, listen for certain things, and then be able to go out and start the day right. And so those habits are really important, no matter how busy your day is or your week is. And then the fourth thing would be seeking out leadership opportunities. What's maybe one thing where you can, maybe it's not a formal title of leadership, but maybe it's taking on more responsibility for a certain area and asking for that. And so those are some practical steps and kind of next steps. I've got my contact information with a lot of different ways to contact me and resources. I'm on a lot of social media, type platforms. And on the website, we've got both blog and podcast, articles and things that you may want to read to draw insight from. And so hopefully those might be helpful to you as well. And if you have follow-up questions, feel free, like I said, to contact me as well. So with that, I want to open it up to questions and see if we have any questions. And Tambla, do you me throw it back to you? Tambla, I don't know if you're on mute or if it's
She had to
Jennifer.
leave.
Okay, all right, Jennifer.
But, I'm here to help handle any questions people have.
Okay.
I just want to let everybody know, if you want to ask a question, you can put in the chat that you want to ask a question. I can unmute your microphone, or you can type your question in the chat and we can read it. All right, so we have a good question here. How do you know on a personal level when you have mastered emotional intelligence? And how do you know you've mastered it when dealing with other people? And then there's more. What do you think or believe can be done to rewire our current culture into having emotional intelligence? Is it something that needs to have been started at a young age?
Wow, those are some great questions.
Yes.
So let me try to deal with the first two. Deal with mastery of emotional intelligence. And I don't, again, going back to the lifelong learner concept, I don't think we ever reach a point of perfect mastery, of that, starting with ourselves and then relating to other people. I think that I would like to think that I'm still growing in that area, and whether it's developing more patience or, other things. I notice just as a father and a husband, and the roles that I play, my boys are at different stages of life. So there's different levels of patience or different levels of understanding that I have to have than when they were 5, than when they're, 20. And even in the relationship, with my wife as well, we've been married 30 years, but still getting to know each other and developing that. And I think, it's an important point. Now, you hope that you're developing expertise along the way and getting better. Examples of that, I think that I've always been an empathetic person. And so there are different ways that shows up. And I think I want to continue to always develop empathy, but that would be an area where I'd say maybe that's a strength of mine. But I wouldn't say, I would never want to get to the point where I think, well, I've mastered that, or I've become an expert, at that. So I think there's some natural things along the way that as you get more experience in and you get put in more situations, that you'll understand, well, hey, I think that's something that's good. Going back and I'll deal with the second half of the questions, but along the way in my career, I worked at Accenture for many years, so a big global consulting organization. And I had people that would just stop in my office and say, hey, I'm thinking about going to grad school. What do you think about that? Or I'm thinking about this project or this project. What do you think about that? Or I'm having a hard time dealing, with this person, and it's a difficult person on my project. Can I talk to you for a few minutes? And those were interesting opportunities that I didn't architect, But later on, and I may have not said, well, here, you need to do this, this, and this. There may have been moments like that, but a lot of it was listening, and effective listening, and just in providing some advice when necessary or needed. But as I started to reach a different launching point for what I'm doing currently today, people came to me and said, well, you should think about being a coach. And this is before really coaching was, now you got all types of coaches that are out there in addition to sports coaches. But that's a thing that I think became, you could say there's some EQ type qualities around that came because of situations and themes that I look back on that I started to then embrace and engage in as well. And it was based on situations and experiences that I had. So hopefully that's helpful for the first two parts of your question. Regarding the second half of the question, I think that I think we all want to change the world. We all want to, but there are 6-7 billion people in the world. So I think we have to start with where we are. It gets back to that sphere of influence. How can I make a difference in my sphere of influence? How can I reflect the right way to understand, to be empathetic, to have compassion, those types of qualities, or to lead out, to cast vision to people who are still seeking, where to go with their life. There's certain qualities and situations I think that you're being placed in now. And I think as you do that, your sphere of influence will start to expand. And it's not to give up on the macro view to make as big of an impact as you can. But I think that what happens is we can get very frustrated with, the macro view, and then we start to fold on the opportunity that we have within our sphere of influence. So that would be kind of my encouragement in that.
And we have another question, another set of questions, which is just two. What is the best practice to be self-aware? And where can I access mentoring or coaching programs for self-development?
Right. So read that first question again. The best practice to be self-aware?
Yes. What is the best practice to be self-aware?
Yeah. So I think that the self-assessment of developing a list of strengths and passions is a first step. And I think that a lot of times we don't sit and write those down. And so I would encourage you, to do that. And part of it's looking back on where have I gotten feedback from other people that, hey, you're really good at that, or do I feel like is a strength of mine, or hey, I feel really energized when I'm doing this. And then I think asking people. I was leading a workshop with some people, with a group of managers. And we gave this challenge. It was a 2-day workshop. And at the end of the first day, we said, we want you to go back and ask somebody who's close to you, somebody who knows you really well. And ask them, what did they see, in you? What do they see as your strengths? And so a person in the back said, well, I've been together with, this person I know for, 20 years. And I don't think there's anything, that he's going to tell me that I don't know, but I'll take your challenge and I'll ask. And so she asked him, and he started, providing some insight that she had never heard from her. And we had a workbook at the time, and she took the workbook and hit him with it. We didn't say to do that, but she said, you've never told me that before. And maybe the setting wasn't right, or maybe it was something that, that is just some insight that he had gained maybe in the last season of life. But I think asking people who are close to you, what do you see in me? What do you see as strengths? What do you see as opportunities? What do you see, that energizes me? Because others can see when your eyes light up when talking about something. And that's how I think something that energizes you. And it could be a hobby, but it also could be a career path as well. And so doing those steps and then asking other people, I think, is important. And then regarding, mentoring and self-development, I would, again, you can Google almost anything today. And so I would, if there's topics that you're interested in, and it could be how to become a better leader, or best books on leadership, or, some other things, start to get a list of those. I think probably HCC probably has some opportunities for mentoring and development as well. So I would take advantage of those. There are probably, alumni, professors, other people who are friends of HCC who come back and speak. I would take advantage of a lot of those. And again, talk to people. I mentioned this finding the free. It's free information, and I would make sure that you focus on that and start. Just one other thing regarding self-development, don't try to do things that other people are passionate about or you feel like you need to do. Do something that's of interest to you. Some people may have favorite books, but that's because that's their favorite book and it's more how they're wired. There are certain core things, whether it be leadership or time management or other things, I think that are always good to develop in. But find an area that you're interested in to then, be able to pursue more. So, Jennifer, would you add anything to that regarding that question?
Well, I mean, I love books, obviously. So,
Yeah.
we do have a lot of good books for self-development at the HCC libraries, and a lot of them are ebooks, which means that you can check them out now as an HCC student if you'd like. And we can help you if you want to come on chat and ask for some help looking for books about self-development.
Yeah.
Um,
And there's so many great podcasts that are out there today as well. There are a lot of podcasts, but there's so many great ones on certain topics as well. And I think find somebody that resonates with you and how they communicate, and then subscribe and make that again a part of your daily routine, whether you go run or get on the bike or elliptical or just, going out to a park. But consume those things as well, even in bite-sized chunks, and you can start that path to development.
Yeah, one of my favorites is a podcast by a former Disney executive, and it's only 15 minutes long.
Yeah.
So, it's very easy to fit in to the day.
Yeah, and that's the trend I'm seeing more and more now, is that these bite-sized chunks, these 20-minute time slots, for podcasts. So
Mhm. We have one person who's requested to see the slide with the definition of emotional intelligence again.
yes, give me 1 second. That one right there.
So hopefully they'll say something.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, that is the one.
Okay. Oh, good. All right. Any other questions?
None have come through on my end.
Okay.
And give people about another minute
Sure.
as they digest the information.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Again, I think it's just, again, an awareness of understanding who you are and how to connect with others. And that's, that's so important, and taking time out for that is important. So I think that one thing that the last year and a half has made all of us aware of, but it definitely made me aware of, is that we just don't know how much time we have. And so making the most of the time that we have, and focusing on that, and we call it, living on purpose for a purpose. And so making sure every day that we're doing things that are on purpose, we're not just kind of going through the motions, but they're on purpose and they're for a purpose, is really important. And I think this is key to that, and understanding kind of, again, who you are.
Mm-hmm. We did have a person asking us about how we consume information from podcasts. When we listen to podcasts and books on the go, do you listen to consume the information, or do you always go back to rewrite it or take notes somewhere?
Yeah. Because I find myself, oh, that was good. I need to write that down. I'm in the middle of a cycling workout and I can't, write that down. So I think that it depends. There are modes where I'll get in where I'm going to consume that. If I'm going through a book, maybe, I'm listening to it, but I'll come back to kind of summarize that. I'm definitely not doing it while I'm driving or trying to write something down, or, while I'm working out, but I'll go back to it and try to summarize that. Sometimes I'll even use the notes app on my phone, pause the podcast. And if I'm, like I said, in a cycling workout or running or, something like that, we'll, use a voice recorder to record that quote. If there are like 3 steps that I want to go back to that they highlighted, I'll go back to the podcast and write that down and just make a note of where that is. That was it. Time marker 10 minutes into the podcast, and go back, to that. So I think there are different modes that you can get in, or you may just want to get a nice set of headphones and go out to the park and take a journal and do it. And I do it in all of those ways. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I use speech to text in the Notes app, if
Yeah.
I'm listening to a podcast or a book and I want to catch something very quickly. Um, that's a very fast way to do it, I
Yeah,
think.
absolutely. Yeah. So, well, I hope this has been helpful. And again, again, I just want to encourage you to go out and think about, how this applies to, who you are right now and the opportunities that you have before you, and just to really go out and make a mark with your life and make a meaningful impact with your life as well. And Jennifer, Dominique, Tamble, I appreciate the time. So,
Yes, thank you so much for coming to join us. We did get one piece of feedback already, which is thank you for the tips. I get overwhelmed at times with audio learning and how to maximize all she's learning from. I enjoyed this session. And then another person says this has been a very good presentation. It's helped clarify a few things for them and given them a direction to move forward in. So
excellent.
thank you.
That's great.
Yes,
Absolutely. Thank you very much. All right. Well,
thank
y'all go out
you.
and have a great rest of the day. Thanks again for inviting me to be a part of this.
You too. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Thanks.
And I just want to give you guys all of the usual student life information you get at the end. This event will be available for playback via our Student Life YouTube channel. All attendees who stayed for the entire event will be placed in a raffle, and three $25 gift cards will be awarded to the winners. Please be on the lookout for an email that says you are a winner in your student email. If you're attending the event for Eagle Points will be awarded within 2 business days of the event. Join us again next Tuesday, April 20th, for Credit Common Sense with financial expert Kenesha Hines. And I will put the link to register in the chat, even though, like I say every week, I hope you've already registered for all of the events in the series because you can do that, which makes it a lot more convenient. Career Services is hosting their HCC Virtual Career Fair Expo, Connection to Your Future, tomorrow, April 14th, 2021. Go to the Career Hub at hccs.edu/career hub to participate. You can go to upcoming events and click career fairs, and it would be a good idea to have a resume ready to upload when you register for the event. It's not required, but it would be very helpful for you. And thank you so much for attending, and we will see you again next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.